Hi, so we're at week 8, and this is a very short video that will review what is going on for week 8. So this week is our first week without our digital notebook, and it will take a little bit of getting used to, so I thank you for your patience. Here is our workbook for the week. Everything is in a Google Doc, and you will find it outlined by the day and by the things that we do each day in our Zoom class. And then, as always, if you are not in Zoom class, the asynchronous work is listed, basically saying that you're responsible for everything we did in the Zoom class. Reminder that this week is a holiday on Wednesday, so there is no school. And then Thursday and Friday, the 12th and 13th, I am not in school, so there will be asynchronous work that is assigned for both of those days. So your challenge this week is to try to figure out how you can manage your time so that the rest of this calendar here you can still do and have everything in this workbook be done for Saturday the 14th at 8 p.m. Just as a reminder, I think it is important to know the rubric each week. And if you make an attempt, you will not fail. You can always revise. I'm interested in the progress of your work. Resources are now linked on the very first page. So please be sure to go back to these resources. Some were from the beginning of the year. And that will help you as you begin your work and complete your work for this week. You can tell that each day begins with this yellow bar. So anytime you want to find a new day, you just look for the yellow bar, or the other way to do it is to click on a link. So if I want to get to Monday's work right away, I'm going to click on the link and it will bring me there. So please never remove these little bookmarks because that is what brings you to the different places when you click on the link. So if I want to get to day 2, the part 1 of day 2, I would click here, and that's going to bring me right there. So everything is linked in here. I just want to go over one quick thing. We do have 2 Pear Decks this week. One is completed in class, and that is considered a quiz. And if you are not in class, this will be Tuesday, the 10th. And if you're not in class, you can access the Pear Deck quiz asynchronously. The link and the code will be provided to you on Google Classroom after school on Tuesday. If you, we will also have a Pear Deck quiz on Thursday. That is your asynchronous work. That link and that code will be made available to you on Google Classroom Thursday morning. There are very specific directions. When it says 3 sentences, please complete in 3 sentences. I'm looking for full sentences. Even a sentence in response to a question, that is a demonstration of your writing. So you really want to aim for full sentences and to increase your vocabulary to use academic language. This week we're thinking about text or plot structure, and we're thinking about conflict and how those two work together. So it is important to watch the slideshows that I will publish. So I published this first one. This will have information about plot structure and about conflict. And I just want to show you a little bit before we get into this so that you have this in case you're absent. So if we think about this triangle, right, and I'm sure you've seen this before, I call it like a witch's hat. The very beginning, things are like right here in terms of energy, and we haven't really started the story. We don't really know too much. So that beginning is where we learn the setting, we learn the characters' names, we learn the time it takes place, the environment. And then we have something that usually kicks us off. And so this may be the first conflict. It is the problem. And so a better way to think about conflict is problem. So we know that there cannot be any movie, there cannot be any story without a problem. So there always needs to be a conflict. And that conflict creates tension, usually between two different characters or between a character and herself. A conflict psychologically, or a problem in her mind, or she's thinking about, she's feeling uncomfortable, or she's wrestling with a new idea. So those are all internal conflicts. And then the conflicts that we have with each other, two characters have with each other, would be external. And then there's this conflict that someone may have with the world, or with society, or with the government, or with schools. There's that conflict that is with society, one person with society. So thinking about that, there are many different conflicts in a story, right? There's not just one. There's usually more than one. And it's important to think of it like this. Sometimes we learn when we're younger, that conflict is between good and evil, and or even between protagonist and antagonist, right? The character that we're rooting for, the character that moves the story forward, and then the antagonist, the character that is fighting the protagonist. And I want to get you to think beyond that, okay? So it's not as simple anymore as a conflict between good and evil, or a conflict between a protagonist and an antagonist. We have to look a little bit more deeply, that conflicts are more nuanced or more woven into the structure. So then after this main initial, sometimes they call it the inciting, so the beginning conflict, you have what's called rising action. And those are a series of events, not even just one event, but it can be many events where the character is solving these problems and running into conflicts, and things happen, right? So this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened. So all these things that happen that lead up to the climax of the story. And this is where the tension just explodes. It's like, we cannot take it anymore. There is something that happens that changes everything, kind of like blows things up. And this is the most exciting part of the story. We also begin to learn what is going to happen to our characters. And then we have everything after the climax of the story would be the falling action. So these are all the events that are leading quickly, usually, to a resolution, or to a finish, to the end of the story. And that falling action has to happen so that things kind of get wrapped up at the end and they fall into place. So that is our text structure and our plot structure. And when we think about here, each time you read a story this week or you listen to a story this week, I'm asking you to identify the universal idea that you feel, in your opinion, is most relevant or most represented or conveyed in that story, by that story. I'm asking you to identify the rising action, okay, the events that lead up to the climax. I'm asking you to identify the climax itself, that high energy tipping point, and then the falling action, all of the events that quickly lead us to the final resolution. It's also called denouement, which is French, but denouement is the final ending. You know, they used to have in plays in the theater, at the very end of some Greek plays, they would have a basket, right? And they would put the protagonist in the basket, and they would lift the protagonist, the character, up. Literally, when you're watching this in the theater, they would just lift the character and the character would fly away. So that's the denouement. Everything is resolved. It might not be a good ending, it might not be a bad ending, but that there is a finish to it. All right, so it's very important that you are able to identify all of those pieces of the plot structure, and more than that, right? It's how does the conflict push the action forward? How does the conflict propel the plot, move us towards this climactic point? And is the conflict external? Is it the character with society, or the character versus another character? Is the conflict internal, the character psychologically with himself or herself, or is it both? It can definitely be both. Remember, there's not just one conflict. So I'm looking forward to hearing your claims about where you believe the conflict is and what type of conflict you believe it is. This week we are going to be watching a very short documentary, a short film called Solo Piano, which is beautiful, by far one of my favorite films. And you are going to be writing a paragraph from the perspective of the person watching the piano from the window. So very particular, just you'll know what I mean when you watch the film. But both of these paragraphs, the other paragraph is with this story called My Grandfather's Shoes, that we will be reading and that we will also be watching. So My Grandfather's Shoes is a story that we're working with on Monday and Tuesday. And if you go back up to Monday, here is the story in text, and here is the story on YouTube. And so definitely make sure that you have listened to and read that story. At the very end of the week, by Saturday night, so this would be your asynchronous work on Thursday and Friday, we have the two paragraphs. The second paragraph is dealing with My Grandfather's Shoes. And this is asking you again to write a letter from the perspective of and in the voice of Christian's grandfather. So please read that very carefully. You cannot get full credit if you do not write. When you see a question on a test, or a question that I ask you that says write from the perspective of someone else, that means put yourself in their shoes. And literally, you use the pronoun I feel, I think, I did so and such and such. But you use I, and the I is actually for the character that you're writing in the voice of. So it has to be first person, and it's not you, it's the person or the character that you are writing from the perspective of, and that's very important. All right, so please email me with any questions. I look forward to the work this week. I think you'll find it a good week, and I will see you soon.